Hello guys and welcome back to another cold episode. Banlist season is here for the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, and I'm going to talk about the ban list and what I would like to see as well as what I'm expecting Konami to do. Now, I'm going to have 3 different ban lists for you that I could see, 2 that I could see Konami doing, and kind of basically doing predictions for a ban list with Konami's ban list in mind and what could potentially what it could potentially be. And then we are also going to do a wish list, which is going to be more so what I expect and what I would want surrounding the current metagame. So first and foremost, we're going to do a prediction tier list, basically. And this is going to be more harsh from Konami's end. More of like specifically hitting the tier 0 deck that is currently happening with Fire. So I say Fire, it's mostly just Snake Eye. So yeah, as we can see, there's a lot of Snake Eye cards in here, and there's a bunch of other cards that I do want to talk about. First thing first, Beatrice, I do not think that they are going to touch this card. I think they're going to remain it, or keep it at 1. Realistically, I think Beatrice just always does some degenerate stuff. I think it's nice to ban. But honestly, you could also put it to 3. It's really not going to do a whole lot. I know some people think that like Beatrice is crazy and it should be banned and stuff like that. But honestly, I think it's a whatever card. I could take it or leave it. At 3, at 1, at 0. Doesn't matter. King Calamity I also don't think is going to be banned. Now, it's banned, I believe, in the OCG. But I think that was because Centurion did a lot better in the OCG than it did here. And I think the OCG is just like wildly different. And so because of that, Calamity like was a used in that rogue tier strategy that was basically just stop the opponent from playing. But I think here it's just not good enough, right? So, yeah. Especially with how prominent things like Nibiru and stuff like that are to kind of stop those plays. So, there you go. Next up, we have Diabellstar. Diabellstar is not getting touched. There's no shot in any capacity that this card is going to be limited in any regard. This is the star player. It'd be like limiting Albaz, right? This is a star player for new lore. It's just not going to be limited. That's just not how Konami's going to do things. Yes, you could argue for limitations to this particular card. I don't think that's where they're going to hit it. This one doesn't really make as much sense as some of the other ones down the list. SP Little Knight is a card that everyone talks about. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this card is crazy. And it's pretty good. I'm not going to act like it's not. I don't think Konami's touching this card. Same thing with Fenrir. I personally, again, don't like this card. I think it's a little too degen. Being able to specifically banish a card face down is just really, really strong. And not only is it a free summon, even going first, which gives you interruption, but it also is extra bodies, especially at 3. Even with that being said, it's still going to go and remain at 3. Flomberg is the first one where I feel like they could actually limit this card. Now, limiting it does allow you to still play the card, which is why I don't think it will likely be banned, and a lot of decks are playing multiple copies to allow them to play through Nibiru and the like, thanks to the temple, the field spell, right? So because of that, Flomberg being put to 1 means that you kind of can't do that, and you need to utilize either its graveyard effect or its other effect. You can't really like insulate yourself through Nib, but then still get the graveyard and the on-field effect. So there you go. This is likely to be something that happens. I've seen a lot of people talking about this in particular being something that happens, and yeah, this just seems like a very Konami move. Hey, people are playing the boss monster at 2. You could play it at 1. Let's do that. It cuts off some of the power level. It's kind of expected. Gimmick Puppet, I have no... I understand why people would want this limited. There is no world in which Konami would ban this card. It doesn't do anything. I know people think it does, but like, you could play Ito, you could play Jaugen, you could play a myriad of other options that also do basically the exact same thing. Yes, it's not technically as good as Gimmick Puppet, but they more or less do the same thing. So because of that, it's going to remain... This card's not going to get touched. But I always see it on these ban lists and in discussions and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's that. Harpour, probably going to go to 2. I believe it's at 1 right now. It's probably going to go to 2. This is pretty self-explanatory. It was at 1. It didn't do anything at 1. It's going to go to 2. They slowly unlimit cards. I could see it just jumped to 3. They've done that a few times, but it's very, very rare. Kieran is a card that could realistically be hit, but because the Fire King stuff isn't nearly as popular as the Snake Eye stuff, and it isn't solely what is carrying the deck, I think Konami is likely to keep this card unchanged. Speaking of Kieran, the other Kieran, probably also going to remain banned. I know that this is unchanged and they're all in like weird spots, but yeah, realistically, these cards are probably not going to get touched. Link Kuriboh, I could see being banned, or Jet Synchron. Okay? One of these is likely to be banned. I don't think both of them is going to be banned. Konami would absolutely do something silly, like ban a Link Kuriboh. That would hit the deck in some regard, basically forcing them to utilize a different Link one, like Anima, like Almirage, etc. Probably Anima. I mean, you already use Anima. You probably would just use that as part of your combo. But it does prevent another body from hitting the field. It prevents you from utilizing it to go into like Dark after like tributing off one of your monsters or something like that. It prevents being able to like dodge effects like an Effect Veiler or an Imperm, right? So there's a lot of reasons as to why this in particular could be banned. And Jet Synchron has similar things where if you are able to get into the Jet Synchron, it just counts as so many bodies, as well as allows you to get into things like Formula Synchron, which can get you into Baron, or it can get you to the with the Diabell Star to get into Borreload Savage Dragon to get that extra Omni Negate and all of that stuff. So because of that capacity, this is another likely ban, especially since it's already been on the ban list for Helka Fibrax reasons. There's another reason. Hey, the new card, we don't want to ban it, so instead we're going to ban the new card, or the old card. Sorry, words are getting tied. But yeah, one of these likely to be banned. If Konami's trying to like really hurt the deck, one of these is likely to be banned, not both. I doubt both of them will. One of them, not the other. Don't know which one. That's kind of my guess. Misk, honestly, they consistently forget about this card. I don't think they're going to remember it. It'll probably just remain unchanged. Next up, we have Original Sinful Spoil. This is probably not going to get hit either. I could see some world in which they limit this card because most people are already playing it at one, and they're not going to ban it. Again, there's no real reason for them as a company to ban it. I don't see this being banned in any capacity. You could maybe argue like, oh, well, it would make sense because they still want to sell like some of the higher rarities and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure this is already a high rarity anyway. So yeah, there's just no real reason for this. Pink could probably go to 2. I might see this at 2 just to give like going second additional options and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's at 1 currently. I don't think it's doing anything. Next up, we have Poplar. Poplar, I think, is likely to be limited. Most people are playing 2. Cut it down to 1. Right? That's kind of what I'm expecting. Just hits to consistency. I don't really know how else you are trying to limit this deck as Konami without entirely killing the deck, which doesn't really seem like a great idea because people just spent a whole lot of money on this deck, and that would lose a lot of players and really sour them on this experience, which would, ultimately hurt your revenue system. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to entirely kill the deck. But if they do want to like heavily hinder it, these are good ways of doing it. So there's that. Although, to be fair, I have a better option. So this might remain unlimited. And we're going to talk about the limitation of Ash. This, I think, is a lot more likely to happen if they're wanting to specifically hurt the deck. Because I don't think they're going to kill it. But if they specifically want to hurt the deck, if they're doing a harsh ban list for Snake Eye, which is fairly likely, not entirely, but there's like a 50-50 chance, right? Limitation of Ash is probably the most likely thing to happen. I don't see them banning this card. It forces people to play more into things like Droll, which means that they would have to actually search something off of something like Bonfire. Also, there's no way they're going to limit Bonfire. We're not even going to talk about that. That's just unreasonable. It like just came out. But it's the same reason as to why I don't think this card is going to be limited, which is just like, this one's too new, this one's slightly older, this one is likely to be limited, it's playing it at 3 copies. They're probably not going to semi-limit it. It's probably going to go to 1. It's going to hurt the consistency, etc. Promethean Princess is not going to get changed. I see no world in which they ban this card. And if they're not going to ban it, they're probably not going to limit it. Actually, they might. They might do a Halka Fibrex thing where it's just like, oh, that doesn't do anything. And they might put Promethean to 1. I'm going to say that they probably will, because that's a very Konami move. Albion could be banned. I could see a world in which that happens. I highly doubt it. I don't think they're going to touch Branded. I don't think they're going to touch anything other than Snake Eye. And maybe, like, Labyrinth? Maybe. But we'll get to that. Wanted. Wanted, I could see being semi-limited. Why? Because Konami wants it to be semi-limited. It's, again, consistency hits. I feel like that's mostly what they would do with Snake Eye, is hit consistency, not necessarily hit power level, right? Prospe's probably not getting touched. I really highly doubt Heavy Storm would come back into this format. There is the precedence of the OCG basically not utilizing Heavy Storm or anything like that, but I really don't see a world in which that's not true. I don't really see Konami really worrying about that and being like, oh, we should unlimit Heavy Storm right now, because it's not really going to be all that useful. So there's that. Anti-Spell, I could see potentially being limited alongside Summon Limit. These are the 2 floodgates that people have kind of pivoted to outside of, or since the limitations of things like Rivalry and Tikaboo. So because of that, I think these are pretty much on the next chopping block. Now, Skill Drain, you would argue, is also there, right? But the thing is, Skill Drain works so very differently because of the fact that top decks aren't being able to side it in and make their combo and then just play under their own Summon Limit, their own Anti-Spell, etc. They can't really do that with Skill Drain, and so because of that, I think it's just going to remain unchanged and remain at 3. I don't really see Konami ever limiting or changing these cards. I think people see this and go, oh, but Skill Drain, but so few decks actually utilize this that I think Konami is just going to be like, no, it's fine. Same with, what is this? Dimensional Barrier, right? It's like a really bad card right now. So, of course, it's not going to see a whole lot of play. People have been clamoring for this to be banned for years now. And it has not even come close. It's not been limited or semied or anything like that. I do not see any capacity where Konami is actually aware of this card in a Link format. That's just not going to happen. Dragon Rulers, I think some of the Dragon Rulers are likely to come off. I'm going to just put this at the semi-limited. This is more so just Dragon Rulers in general, likely to come off, likely to be unlimited in some capacity. Sky Striker's going to 3. I do not like Engage. I think Engage is a poorly designed card. That's just me. And I don't like the advantage that it generates. But Sky Striker's not good right now, so like, Konami's going to be like, hey, our fan favorite deck that we made a freaking manga about, yeah, you can have this card back. You're not doing anything. Go for it. And honestly, in terms of power level, yeah, for sure. Sky Striker can have Engage. It's not going to change anything. And honestly, I do think Konami's going to look at what buffs they could potentially give to other decks while still limiting Snake Eye. And so this just seems like the most logical choice. I don't think Voice is too new. I don't think they're going to do any limitations to it, especially since it's like not even remotely close to Snake Eye, and I don't think there are any other decks. Like, Konami would probably want to push Voiceless Voice more so than limit it in any capacity. Shifter, Konami loves Shifter. I could see semi-limitation to Big Welcome in particular. I could also see a semi-limitation to some of the furnitures as well, but there's going to be some sort of small, basically slap on the wrist for Labyrinth, so that Labyrinth kind of comes back into line post a Snake Eye limitation. So I think that's kind of the idea. Is Labyrinth good right now? No, it's a best of 3 format. Labyrinth is like tragically bad. Though it did technically win a whole bunch of regionals, but who cares? It's still not like an insane deck, right? And so because of that, I feel like it is going to be less so on... I don't think Konami's going to actually like pay attention to it and really be like, oh, this is the deck to hit. But I do think that there will be some sort of limitation, some sort of hits. Shavara is currently at 1. in the TCG for some reason. And with that, it basically killed Unchained. I say killed. Yeah, it did. Because right after that, we got Snake Eye. So, yeah, the deck basically died. And I do think that Konami's just not going to really worry about buffing decks, because they never really do until it's too late, right? They never give a card back when it's actually reasonable, right? And it would actually help a deck. They tend to keep it locked away in jail for way too long. Brand Diffusion is going to remain at 3. I really don't see any changes to that. I can't remember if Terratop's at 2 or at 3, but it would go to the next one. I think it's at 2 right now. So I think it would go to 3. It's so hard to remember. Masterpiece is still going to remain banned. I don't see a world in which this comes off. Now, let's talk about Kit Colors. Now, I love Kit Colors. And I would love to see it limited to 1. To give Tier Limit basically the ability to play into Snake Eye. And actually have the ability to have another top deck. Especially a water deck, which would be very thematic. But alas, Konami's not going to do that. They're going to keep it banned. Same with Trident. I think they genuinely just forgot this card existed. And then they released it in Master Duel. And then the TCG format just, again, forgot it existed. Barrage is also banned in the TCG. I couldn't tell you why, but it is. And I have pre-preparation of rights on here for Voiceless Voice as like a Voiceless Voice hit, but honestly, I don't think that is going to be changed. This is going to be more of a specific Snake Eye hit. We're going to target this deck. We're going to make sure that it is targeted and in line and able to like have other decks play with it and stuff like that, while not killing the deck. I think that's kind of the idea behind this one. And I would say that this is definitely a harsher list. But I do have another list already prepared that I would say is more likely to happen if they're not necessarily going after Snake Eye, and more so kind of doing minor adjustments, right? I still have one of these 2 cards getting banned. Again, don't know which one. One of them in some capacity. I also have either... not either. I have Kieran, the Fire King card, being limited, as well as Poplar, because that doesn't like hinder the deck a whole lot, but it still kind of hurts them. It hurts the Fire King variant of the deck, which makes that like pure Snake Eyes a little bit more popular, but again, with the limitation to something like Snake Eye Ash, or semi-limitation, it hurts that deck's consistency, which is its main selling point, as opposed to the Fire King stuff. So because of that, maybe you'll still play the Fire King stuff, and that's kind of the idea that I think Konami may go with in a lighter ban list. I still think some limitations to the fields, or to the floodgates, they're going to be semi-limited, because Konami has Brain Rot. These cards are still good being semi-limited, all of this stuff still being semi-limited, going from 1 to 2. Makes sense, and basically no other changes, right? Again, Engage probably could go to 3. There's a few other things that like, oh yeah, these could realistically probably go to 3 or stuff like that. But this, I would say, is a lot more likely to happen. I don't think Konami is currently in the mood to really kill a deck. Now, I will say, Poplar is actually unlikely to be hit because it is new, so I'm actually just going to move Snake Eye Ash here. I forgot Poplar like literally just came out. So yeah, in terms of limitations, it's probably going to just be Snake Eye Ash to 1, more so than anything. But there's going to be like that small minor hit there that I think is more likely. This is more likely something that would happen. If they wanted to do a bigger one, it'd be something closer to this. I could be very wrong. I have no idea how Konami thinks. They do the weirdest, jankest stuff, and so it's very hard to get a read on what they're actually trying to do. And so because of that, I'm kind of just guessing, but I have a few inklings as to what they could or couldn't do. Especially things like this, where that seems to be Konami's MO, is hitting random like tech options. At least that's the case in the OCG and the Master Duel. But anyway. That's it for the predictions. Now let's talk about my wish list. And I've already created it here for you, and you may notice it's very different. First of all, no semi-limits. I hate semi-limited cards. They just don't look good. There is one card that should be semi-limited, period, ever, and that is Malicious. Malicious is the only card that should ever be semi-limited. Other than that, put it to 1, put it to 3, that's it. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the bans. Okay? Sorry, this has to go up here. Let's talk about the bans. Okay? Beatrice. It does stupid things. Just ban it. It's fine. King Calamity. Just ban it. No one likes it. Albion. The only thing Albion is used for, in the TCG specifically, is to lock your opponent with Gimmick Puppet. That's it. That is like the only thing that that card is used for. I know technically that's not the case, but pretty much that's it. Right? So, when it comes to Albion, this is a very easy ban to get rid of the Gimmick Puppet situation, to get rid of that lock, to basically prevent the opponent from utilizing any of that shenanigans, or just even yourself, right? Just Branded doesn't get to Gimmick Puppet lock you or lock you in any capacity. I know Ito was pretty popular in early Master Duel. So, stuff like that, right? Just, no, not allowed. Now, in the OCG and in Master Duel, this plays around Max C, so I don't see something like that happening in those formats. But in the TCG, because Max C doesn't exist, yeah, it makes sense to just get rid of that card. Who cares? Next up, again, Wishlist. Apollosa, Baron are on like every end board of every top deck for the past years, and they have been crucial points to the end board. Things that genuinely make the end board actually annoying, and things that are not fun to play against. Genuinely. No one likes seeing 3 to 4 mat Appos hit the field. No one likes seeing a Baron hit the opponent's field. That's just not something that you are enjoying playing against. Unless your hand is like specifically cracked, you just don't enjoy it, right? So because of that, I really do think that these two, at this point, should probably be considered in terms of limitations or bannings. Most notably, I mean, bannings, obviously. Right. They're just too powerful for generic cards. And that's it. Next up, I have Access Code Talker. I hate this card. This is a personal vendetta. I don't like it. Ban it. I've given my reasons before. I'll give them real quick. Access Code Talker basically just forces your opponent to have very specific outs to it, and it is an OTK machine, and I really don't like it for Cyberse decks in particular, having access to Update Jammer on top of the Access Code Talker to basically just say, cool, I get to end you through a full board, which is really not very fun to play against because you can't respond to it. Not a big fan of that. Just think it's a poorly designed card, and don't like it. Get it out of there. In terms of limitations, I have many, and we'll talk about them. Flomberg. Snake Eye Ash, Wanted. I like consistency hits to Snake Eye. I don't really see a world in which hitting the like higher end of their end board is really a great idea, especially if we're banning Apollosa and Baron as well, because that is the higher end of their end board. And so because of that, I feel like the limitations to consistency forces them to play into Droll more often, forces them to play into Nibiru more often, forces them to play into most other hand traps as well more often, and not have the ability to just make their end board for free through multiple interactions. This means that things are going to be more interactive, and you aren't going to just have, cool, I'm just going to play through your board pretty consistently. Or not your board, but your hand traps pretty consistently, right? Same thing with Wanted, right? Wanted also can draw you cards, which means that potentially if your opponent hand traps you twice and then you go for the Wanted to shuffle back a card, you are then able to draw into the starter that you may need. Kind of silly, like a Bonfire or what have you, right? Next up, Fenrir. I don't like this card. I think it's pretty good at 1. At 3, it's too powerful. It just does too much. It is able to search itself, which I think is the biggest issue. So if you put it to 1, it doesn't have that capability, which I think makes it a little bit better, and means that if you are going to play a Kashtira like engine, you do have to commit to the engine because you have to actually have another search target other than just the Fenrir loop. Prosperity, I don't like this card. Put it to 1. In fact, you should probably ban it, but you know what? Put it to 1. It's fine. The Floodgates, put them to 1. Makes sense. That means that they're less likely to be boarded options and stuff like that, and your opponent is a lot less likely to see them. And if you end up actually dealing with the card, you know that there's not another one, which is really nice. Same thing with this guy. I put it to 1. Seems kind of weird. I still want Labyrinth to be able to utilize Dimensional Barrier, but I don't want it to be a sideboarded option in a like more diverse format, right? Where you can just be like, cool, I'm just going to side this in going first, and then if my opponent is playing a Synchro deck, I get to just flip it up and call Synchro. Right, I want it to specifically be something that is like a search target. And the only deck that currently does that is Labyrinth, but like, I like Labyrinth, so that's okay. Shifter to 1. What am I talking about? Ban it. Yeah, Shifter should just be banned. Engage can go to 1. I am a notorious hater of Engage. I've already talked about this. I don't like it. Put it to 1. So, pre-preparation of rights is specifically a limitation to voiceless voice without actually touching the voiceless voice cards. So voiceless voice is probably going to be the second best deck post nerfs to Snake Eyes, or like right now it is the second best deck, right? But post nerfs to Snake Eyes, it's still going to be a fairly decent deck and probably top tier. So with minor limitations, like genuinely minor limitations, I think it may allow for other decks to pop up and to be playable. Now, with that being said, Kit Kalos to 1 also gives you the ability to play as well with other decks, right? Giving that essential buff. Now, this could be a big mistake because we could just go back to a tier format with Kit Kalos to 1. So, if I were to also put a card to 1 on here, I don't have it here, but I would also put the field spell to 1. You can have Kit Kalos, you can't have 3 of the field spell. You can have one or the other, you can't have both. And I think the field spell limitation is probably worse than like anything else, right? So that's similar to what Master Duel currently has as well, which I think is probably like the best way to make tier, except actually allow Merly. I don't know why that card is banned. That's died for the sins of Elf, let's be honest. But yeah, all things considered, you gotta limit at least the field spell if Kit Kalos is coming back, and I'm not gonna act like that is not something you can't or you can do. Is have 3 of the field spell and Kit Kalos. That would just make it the best deck, let's be honest. Next up, True Diagram, or True Draco Diagram, I think you can go to 3, no problem. Yeah, like all of these cards right here, these 4 cards right here, actually these, like, all of these cards right here, can all go to 3, and it would change nothing. Nothing would change with the format, at all. I still do not know as to why Kieran is banned. Konami is so scared of oh, excuse me. Konami is so scared of this pendulum, and this pendulum is doing nothing. It's not going to do anything. We don't have Electromite. Yeah, this card can go to 3. It's not going to change anything. Who cares? Put it to 3. Put it to 5. I don't care. It's not going to do anything. It's a pendulum. Okay, let's talk about Shavara. Shavara, I think, is a kind of an unlucky hit. Unchained was probably the best deck prior to Snake Eyes. So because of that, it deserved some sort of limitation. The limitation being Shavara put to 1. Shavara is probably the best card in that deck. Maybe you could argue Yama, but it's one of those two, right? In terms of cards from the deck, these are just 2 very strong ones, right? And Shavara going to 1 means that you're less likely to open it, and you kind of have to utilize it either for its rank 6 potential or for its ability to be used in hand. And it really was a good limitation. It really did hurt the deck without entirely killing it. And then the Snake Eye cards came out, and it was tragic, because now, all of a sudden, we lost our best deck to a ban list, and also a new best deck showed up and killed everyone. Tragic. So, with that limitation in mind, put Shavara back to 3. Buff some other decks, that's why Tier Limit is on here. You know, buff some other decks, give them a bit more oomph, and then Fire King, pull them back into into the line of acceptability, and you have a nice format, in theory. Hopefully. And then I have a whole bunch of things that are on here that just wouldn't change, right? Now, Skill Drain. I know a lot of people don't like Skill Drain. I think Skill Drain is absolutely fine in the TCG. I've played against Skill Drain. I know what it's like. I genuinely do. Sitting across the table from it can suck, especially if your deck doesn't have outs to it. I still think it's fine. I think that games with Skill Drain are not draining the skill from the duel. I think there is still a lot that can be done, and that you can do under Skill Drain. Yes, it can be terribly annoying. Yes, it can be unfun. I get that. I think it's one of the best floodgates because it doesn't just stop you from playing the game. You can still summon your monsters. You can still activate your spells. You can still activate your traps. You can still do everything. You can even activate most monster effects from either hand or grave or something like that. It's just on field. If they are on the field when they are resolving, they don't get their effect, which does hinder a lot, but it also doesn't hinder, like, anything. right? Snake Eye Ash, you could tribute off your monster, and you still get the summon. You could still go into the big boy, right? Like, all of the Unchained stuff just doesn't care. All of the Fire King stuff doesn't care. Tearlament barely cares, right? And that's why I think, like, yeah, a lot of decks just kind of don't care about this card, and I think it's fine. If it were to cause an issue, like, several of the top decks just lost to this card, so it became a gimmick, yeah, it'd be annoying. Like, Shifter. But it's not that, so I think it's okay. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I didn't know I had such feelings about Skill Drain. But anyway, that's going to be it for my wish list and for the overall ban list. Again, these are what I'm expecting to be the ban lists in terms of predictions, and yeah, I don't expect this ban list to be a big one. Even though we are in a tier 0 format, I still don't expect it to be a big one, just because Konami kind of painted themselves into a hole that's not painted themselves into a corner with the release schedule and stuff like that. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy it. If you did, I like it very much. So appreciate it. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.